Welcome to the House of Coaching Deep Dive podcast with Marsha and John. Join them as they explore the wealth of knowledge from leading coaches Steph, Carl, and Hans.
Bring out the best in you. Feel the sky turn blue.
The holidays are always a bit of a mixed bag, right?
Yeah.
Like, you've got the good food and the festive decorations and, of course, the chance to catch up with loved ones. But then there are those moments,
Yeah.
those awkward conversations that can kind of pop up at the dinner table.
Mm-hmm.
It reminded me of this hilarious podcast I listened to a while back, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's from 2020
Okay.
by Hans and Steph, colleagues of ours over at the House of Coaching. And they were talking about how to navigate those tricky conversations,
Yeah.
and make sure you actually enjoy your holiday dinner.
Absolutely.
Right.
And with the holidays approaching again, I thought it'd be the perfect time for us to kind of do our own deep dive into some clever communication techniques that can help you handle those awkward moments
Yeah.
with grace and maybe even a little bit of humor.
Yeah.
Think of it as a 2024 refresh for your holiday survival guide.
Perfect. So let's dive right in. Imagine this scene. You're at the holiday dinner table surrounded by relatives, and suddenly you're trapped in a conversation about, those topics that tend to go nowhere fast.
Right.
Maybe it's Aunt Martha's endless saga about her prize-winning petunias, or perhaps it's that uncle who just can't resist launching into a passionate diatribe about his political views.
We've all been there.
Right.
We've all been there. And that's where having a few communication strategies up your sleeve can really come in handy.
Yeah, for sure.
One technique that's incredibly effective is the yes and technique.
Okay.
It comes from the world of improv comedy,
Uh-huh.
and it's all about accepting what's thrown at you and then building on it in a playful way.
Okay, so how would this actually work in a real-life situation?
Right.
Let's say Aunt Martha's going on and on about her petunias again. Instead of zoning out or trying to abruptly change the subject, you could say something like, yes. And speaking of flowers, did you hear about that garden that won that absolutely ridiculous local competition?
Yeah,
Apparently, the owner trained their sunflowers to do synchronized swimming.
exactly. You're acknowledging her topic, but you're adding a touch of absurdity and humor to lighten the mood and shift the focus.
Yeah.
The beauty of this technique is that it works on a psychological level.
Okay.
By saying yes, and you're essentially disarming the other person. You're not contradicting them or shutting them down, which can often make them more defensive.
Right.
Instead, you're showing them that you're listening and engaging, which creates a more positive and open dynamic.
It's like you're saying, I hear you, and I'm going to add my own twist to this.
Yeah.
It's a subtle way of redirecting the conversation without making it feel forced or confrontational.
Mm-hmm.
I actually used a similar technique at a family gathering not too long ago.
Oh, really?
My uncle was going on and on about his stamp collection. Fascinating topic for about 5 minutes. But then it started to feel like a lecture.
I know that feeling.
So I jumped in and said something like, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
It reminds me of when I tried to start a dust bunny liberation movement. Turns out those little guys are surprisingly organized.
Yeah.
Everyone burst out laughing, including my uncle. It totally broke the tension, and we ended up having a hilarious conversation about the most ridiculous things we'd ever collected.
That's fantastic. It shows that humor is such a powerful tool for diffusing tension and creating connection. And remember, the key is to be playful, not dismissive.
Right.
You want to acknowledge the other person's interests while also injecting a bit of your own personality into the conversation.
Right. It's about finding that balance between being respectful and keeping things light and engaging.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've got yes and in our conversational toolkit.
Okay.
What's next?
Let's move on to another technique that's perfect for those situations where someone's dominating the conversation.
Well-
We call this one topic pinball. The idea is to keep the conversation bouncing between different people at the table, just like a pinball machine.
I like the sound of this.
Yeah.
So let's say someone is talking nonstop about their latest obsession.
Yeah.
It could be anything from their elaborate model train set to their newfound passion for competitive knitting.
Right.
How do we use topic pinball to gracefully redirect the conversation?
Well, instead of trying to cut them off or directly change the subject, you can gently interject with something like, that reminds me, Sarah, didn't you mention you were starting a new hobby too? Tell us about that.
So you're catching their topic and bouncing it to someone else.
Yeah.
Keeping the energy up and preventing the conversation from getting stuck in one place. I can see how this would be particularly useful at larger gatherings where you want to make sure everyone feels included.
Precisely. And the good thing about topic pinball is that it's very subtle. You're not shutting down the original speaker. You're simply creating space for others to contribute their thoughts and stories. Speaking of redirecting conversations, I remember a time when I had to use topic pinball at a Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh, tell me more. What happened?
Well, the conversation had veered into politics, which can be a bit of a minefield, especially during the holidays.
Oh, yeah.
I could feel the tension rising, and I knew I had to do something to shift the energy. So I quickly chimed in with, "Hey, speaking of current events, has anyone seen that new documentary about the history of Thanksgiving? I heard it's fascinating."
That's a great example. It's all about finding those natural transitions and steering the conversation towards safer waters. It's about being a good conversational host, making sure everyone feels comfortable and included.
Exactly. And remember, it's important to do all of this in a way that's non-offensive and respectful.
Right.
You're not trying to silence anyone or shut down their passions. You're simply trying to create a more balanced and enjoyable experience for everyone.
I think that's a great point to emphasize. It's not about winning or being right.
Right.
It's about being mindful and considerate of the people around us, especially during the holidays when we're supposed to be celebrating togetherness and connection. But, there are times when you might encounter someone who's a bit more, shall we say, resistant to redirection.
Yes, those idea imposers we were talking about earlier. The folks who are absolutely convinced that everyone should invest in their latest cryptocurrency scheme or try their new miracle diet.
Yeah.
They can be a bit tricky to handle, but don't worry, we've got a technique for them too.
Bring it on. Let's hear it.
It's called the curiosity curveball.
Okay.
And it's all about disarming those idea imposers with humor.
Okay.
Instead of directly challenging their idea, which can lead to arguments you respond with innocent but impossible to answer questions.
Okay. I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
Let's say your cousin is passionately pitching his foolproof plan to get rich quick with cryptocurrency. You could say something like, "Interesting. How does your crypto handle time travel transactions?" Or if someone is pushing their miracle diet, you could ask, "Does this diet also work for pets?" Asking for a friend with a chubby hamster.
I love it. You're not arguing or being confrontational, but you are subtly pointing out the absurdity of their claim in a way that's more likely to make them laugh than get defensive. It's like a conversational judo move.
Exactly. You're using their own momentum against them and redirecting it with humor. And sometimes laughter is truly the best way to diffuse a potentially tense situation. It can lighten the mood, break down barriers, and remind everyone that we're all just trying to have a good time.
I'm already feeling more prepared for those holiday gatherings.
Good.
But I know we've got more to cover in our holiday survival guide.
We do indeed. There are a few more techniques I think you'll find quite helpful, so stick with us. We'll be right back after a quick.
Hey there, awesome listener. Want to know something exciting? In this episode, Marsha and John give away 20 free copies of the amazing book Beyond Words. Head over to podcast.thehouseofcoaching.com right now to claim yours. Remember, once they're gone, they're gone.
All right, so we've talked about using humor and gentle redirection to navigate those tricky conversations. But what about those relatives who just love to share long, meandering stories that, shall we say, lose their audience after a while?
Yes, the epic storytellers. Well, for those situations, we recommend the story sandwich.
Okay.
This technique is all about gracefully acknowledging their story and then layering in something more entertaining to keep everyone engaged.
Okay, I'm picturing a delicious sandwich here.
Right.
So how do we build this story sandwich? Give me the ingredients.
Let's say your Uncle Bob is recounting in painstaking detail his recent trip to the grocery store. You can say something like, "That's quite a tale, Uncle Bob. It reminds me of the time I tried to buy groceries online and accidentally ordered 10 pounds of potatoes instead of 10 ounces.
Oh, wow.
I ended up making enough mashed potatoes to feed a small army."
So you're acknowledging their story, adding a dash of humor with your own anecdote, and then what's the final layer of the sandwich?
The key is to then gently steer the conversation in a new direction. You could ask a question related to your anecdote, like, "Has anyone else ever had an online shopping mishap?" Or you could bring up a completely different topic, like, "Speaking of food, who's excited for dessert?"
I see. So it's about finding a smooth transition that feels natural and engaging rather than abruptly changing the subject. It's like adding a little spice to a dish that needs a flavor boost. I think this technique could also be helpful for dealing with those folks who love to give unsolicited advice.
Absolutely. Let's say someone is giving you a lecture on how to raise your children, even though you don't have any. You could say, that's interesting advice. It reminds me of when I was a kid and thought I knew everything. Hey, remember when we used to build forts out of blankets? Who wants to try and recreate that?
Brilliant.
Yeah.
You're acknowledging their perspective, but you're shifting the focus to a shared memory or a more lighthearted topic. It's a clever way to diffuse tension and create a more positive atmosphere. Now, we've covered a lot of individual techniques,
Right.
but are there any strategies we can use to shift the overall energy of a gathering?
There certainly are. And one that's particularly effective is what we call the conversation potluck.
Oh.
Think of it like a traditional potluck dinner where everyone brings a dish to share.
Mhm.
In this case, everyone brings a funny story, a weird fact, or an interesting anecdote to the conversational table.
I love that analogy. So how do we get this conversation potluck started?
You could simply say something like, all right, everyone, before we dive into another debate about pineapple on pizza, let's share some fun stories. Who has the most embarrassing holiday memory? Or, let's test our trivia knowledge. What's the weirdest fact you know?
That's such a great way to break the ice, get people laughing, and create a more inclusive atmosphere. It encourages everyone to participate and share something unique, which can lead to some truly memorable moments.
Exactly. It's all about creating a space where everyone feels comfortable contributing and connecting. And it can be a lot of fun to see what kind of stories and tidbits of knowledge people bring to the table. Now, what about those times when the conversation gets a little heated? Maybe someone brings up a sensitive topic, or there's just a general feeling of tension in the air.
Yeah.
How do we navigate those choppy waters?
That's a good question. In those situations, it's important to remember that our goal is to create a harmonious and enjoyable experience for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
We're not trying to win arguments or prove anyone wrong.
Absolutely. And sometimes the best way to de-escalate a tense situation is to simply shift the focus.
Okay.
One technique that can be helpful in these moments is what we call the rewind and remix.
Ooh, that sounds intriguing.
Yeah.
Tell me more about how to rewind and remix.
Imagine your aunt is going on and on about her new miracle diet, and you can sense that people are getting a little tired of hearing about it. You can playfully rewind the conversation and remix it with a bit of absurdity. You could say something like, okay, let's rewind that conversation about your amazing diet and add a twist.
Yeah.
What if those delicious Christmas cookies were about to have the same effect? We'd all be floating to the ceiling by dessert.
I love it. It's like you're acknowledging their topic, but adding a touch of whimsy to lighten the mood and subtly suggest moving on.
Precisely. And because you're doing it in a playful way, it's less likely to offend or create resistance. Now, of course, there are times when even the most skillful conversational maneuvering isn't enough.
Right.
Maybe you're dealing with someone who's particularly insistent or just won't let a topic go.
Yeah.
For those moments, we have what we call the emergency ejector button.
Okay, I'm definitely going to need this one.
know.
Tell me what exactly is the emergency ejector button?
This is where you pull out those utterly ridiculous conversation starters that are guaranteed to derail any awkward silence or tense topic.
Okay.
Think along the lines of, did you know that penguins have knees? Or, who would win in a snowball fight? Santa's elves or the Easter Bunny's workforce?
Those are fantastic. I can already imagine the confused but amused looks on everyone's faces. It's like throwing a conversational grenade to completely shift the battlefield.
Exactly. Sometimes the best defense is a good distraction, and these quirky questions are sure to elicit some laughs and get people thinking about something completely different. And hey, you might even learn something new in the process.
I'm all for injecting some fun and randomness into those holiday gatherings. So we've explored a whole arsenal of communication techniques for navigating those tricky conversations that can pop up during holiday gatherings. From the playful yes and to the strategic topic pinball and the ever-reliable emergency ejector button, we've got a strategy for just about every scenario.
And remember, the key is to approach these conversations with a spirit of playfulness, empathy, and a genuine desire to create a positive experience for everyone. It's not about winning arguments or proving anyone wrong. It's about fostering connection and enjoying those precious moments with loved ones.
Absolutely. And sometimes that means recognizing that we don't have to engage in every conversation.
Right.
It's okay to set boundaries and prioritize our own well-being.
That's such an important point. If you find yourself feeling overwhelmed or cornered by a particularly relentless conversationalist, it's perfectly acceptable to excuse yourself gracefully.
Okay.
You could say something like, I'm just going to freshen up my drink, or I need to check on the dessert.
Right.
A little strategic escape never hurt anyone.
Exactly. It's all about being mindful of our own energy and knowing when to step away.
Yeah.
And remember, even the most challenging holiday gatherings are just temporary situations.
That's right.
They don't last forever.
They don't last forever. Focus on the positive connections, savor the delicious food, and embrace the spirit of the season. And remember, laughter is truly the best medicine. Don't be afraid to inject a little humor into those conversations. It can lighten the mood, break down barriers, and remind everyone that we're all in this together.
I love that. It's about choosing joy and connection over conflict and tension.
Mm-hmm.
So as we wrap up our holiday survival guide, what are your final words of wisdom for our listeners as they head into the holiday season?
I would say go forth and communicate with confidence, kindness, and a good dose of humor. Remember, you have the power to shape the conversations and create a more enjoyable experience for yourself and everyone around you. And if you find yourself needing a little extra support or inspiration, don't hesitate to visit our website, podcast.houseofcoaching.com, for more resources on communication and personal growth.
That's a great reminder. And if you have any funny holiday dinner stories or communication tips of your own, we'd love to hear them. Share them with us on our website or social media. We're all in this together.
From all of us here at The Deep Dive, we wish you a happy, harmonious, and laughter-filled holiday season.
Cheers to that. Happy holidays, everyone.
You've been listening to the House of Coaching podcast, where real transformation happens one conversation at a time. If today's insights sparked your interest, hit that like button and subscribe. You would not want to miss what's coming up next as Marsha and John take you behind the scenes of more transformative sessions with our master coaches. Visit thehouseofcoaching.com, connect with us on LinkedIn, and join a community of forward-thinking professionals who are reshaping the future of business.
John and Marsha spark the flames, coaching tips to fit your aims. No more playing simple games. Unlock the power deep inside. Let the House of Coaching be a guide. Run the race with giant strides. No more reasons left to hide. Bring out the best in